Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Go Local Live in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. It is Monday, February 19th. Hopefully you are enjoying the day. Many of you might have President's Day off or just enjoying the beginning of school vacation week. So either way, even if you are working, thank you so much for joining us as we kick off Go Local Live on this Monday afternoon. For my first guest, I would like to say hello and welcome to the Providence City Archivist, Caleb Horton. He is joining me now live in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Caleb, hello.
Yeah, hello. Nice to have me here, and I'm glad to do an interview today for you guys.
Yeah, we're so grateful to have you here today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the archive itself, how it came to be, what's in it, a little bit about what you do. But first we're going to talk a little bit about the exhibit that's coming up. It's opening this Thursday for Black History Month. It's called Home, the Housing Struggle in Providence from 1950 through today. So last week we spoke with Councilwoman Mary Kay Harris about the show, about the exhibit. So we wanted to get your input and find out a little bit more about the documents itself and what's actually in it. Can you talk to us just a little bit about the exhibit?
So, well, the exhibit takes place roughly 1950, right after big changes that were happening in the United States at the time that actually affected Providence quite greatly. They call it the White Flight. This is basically right after World War II. There was, the GIs were returning home with the GI Bill, and Providence experienced one of the greatest population losses per capita, about 28% out of any city in the United States. According to the U.S. Census in 1950, we had about almost 250,000 people living in the city, and by 1970 that dipped to about 180,000.
Oh, wow.
So the stories are basically about our kind of civil rights movement up here. In the South it was Jim Crow and segregation. Ours had really a lot to do with fair housing, which is a form of segregation in itself, but so our story is unique to the out-migration and how that left the city in kind of an urban decay, and the lack of affordable housing and fair housing.
That's pretty. No, I was going to say, I mean, that's pretty incredible. And to know that, and we've talked about this before on the show, to know that the inequalities and the fights here were different than they were in other places, and not to say that they were very different. Where do we know, looking at these archives, where people went?
Yeah, specifically, most of the exhibit actually focuses on affordable, like project housing. Typically, Chad Brown, Valley View, Cotting Court, Roger Williams, the Hartford Park housing projects. There was not a whole lot of these housing projects actually were built in the 1940s during World War II, predicting that the GIs would actually move into those buildings, and they didn't. And a lot of minorities went into those areas. And we talk about just the fight just to get more affordable housing, not to be segregated in these regions, so to speak. And it's interesting to see it's a story of basically, you have these fair housing movements, and actually in 1964 there was a big civil rights movement, and they had a march outside of City Hall. They had a march outside the State House. So the theme in this exhibit is basically what is home, and what defines home, and part of it's just the fight to have housing that's affordable and available and not in a kind of decay. There's several examples of that we show in the exhibit. So it's actually kind of a roller coaster. There's a lot of things that they succeeded at and achieving, and then there's things that it kind of went backwards and things went into decay and the lack of affordable housing that was really out there.
It's pretty incredible to think that this movement started, and if you look at where we are today, we're still fighting the same fight. We're still looking at people who still need fair and affordable housing. Multiple populations, multiple people are still looking at continuing that effort. What are some of the, if you can just have you scoot over a little bit for me. Caleb, thank you. We're still looking at continuing this effort. It might be in different forms, but you mentioned there are different parts of this exhibit that you can see there were victories, and then of course we're still looking at continuing this battle. What are some of the either items that people can look at and enjoy? Like, are there flyers from different marches and that kind of thing? What are some of the things that people can look at and say, oh wow, that really happened?
Well, we showcase a lot of city documents. There was a lot of reports, annual reports, a lot of stuff from the Providence Housing Authority. Actually, a lot of our photographs come from the Providence Journal, which is a big help. A lot of the artifacts, they're not necessarily 3D objects. We mostly have, paper documents, reports, annual reports, and things like that. But we have these reports, that document the history since about roughly 1945, with one of the first annual reports from the Providence Housing Authority that actually talks about the city being divided into 3 different central areas. Wow. We actually have reports when they built the I-95 project, which actually greatly affected entire neighborhoods. Entire neighborhoods were moved and people were displaced, and kind of it especially affected minority populations who kind of had to move into new neighborhoods that were completely alien to them, almost into these to these different housing projects. It really kind of reinvented the city. So we have a lot of those kind of reports, a lot of government reports and things of that nature.
Well, it's interesting when you think about it. You just mentioned I-95. I mean, really probably uprooted people's lives. I mean, it must have. And so to be able to go back and look at the records and see how it did that and how it impacted that, I mean, to me, that's just fascinating. I was over at Roger Williams Park just this weekend, and you can see, you're in the park, and then people's houses are up against the park, and there's graves right in the park, and you're looking at the dynamics, and it's quite interesting. So to be able to go back and look at the records, I think that could be pretty unique.
Yeah, I mean,
to be able to do that.
It essentially divided the city into 3 sections, and even the North Burial Ground, which I like to tell stories about that. Actually, even there's whole burial plots that ended up getting plowed over. Essentially, they were called paupers' graves, so they were, they usually belonged to more the poor people that couldn't afford, gravestones and things like that. But there's a lot of history that was kind of lost.
What happened?
They basically just plowed right through it when they built I-95. Historic preservation back in 1962 wasn't what it is today, essentially.
Wow, that's troubling.
Yeah.
So those people are just gone?
I think they moved a lot of the graves, but I don't know how counted for it is.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Well, so now at least we all have a highway to drive on.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, that's interesting. So I guess we can all be proud of the good records that are kept and the preservation that we do come to have. So the exhibit does take place. This is the 3rd exhibit that you've had for Black History Month. How does this exhibit differ from the ones that you've done in the past couple years?
Well, when we first started, we started with African American first, and they're mostly, everything we do is Providence centric because it's the Providence City Archives.
Makes sense.
So it was mostly African American first in Providence. The first African American police officer, the first African American council person, etc. The second year we did black suffrage in Providence in the African American community on the east side, which was primarily off of Meeting Street. There's actually a black church that was up there that was kind of the central hub of that community. And we talked about the community itself, and then the suffrage movement that happened about during the Door Rebellion with the African American community. They actually lobbied to achieve the right to vote, but of course, it was the first step because only African American males could vote at that point. As you know, women's suffrage came much later, but it was primarily focused in the 19th century, whereas this is kind of like phase 2. So we're trying to focus it more on the 20th century.
Neat. Well, it sounds like a very exciting exhibit. So that opens up on Thursday, a special event February 22nd at 11 a.m. So if you're interested. I'm curious, let's move on our conversation to the archives itself. Are the archives open to the public in general? Do you have to make a special appointment?
Oh yeah, they're open. We're open 8:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday, and there's no appointment necessary. We're kind of unique with a lot of archives where we don't make people come for an appointment. It helps if you have a very complex research question. We can actually prepare the material for you before you come in, but anyone's welcome. we house all our records are public, the people's records, so they're always available for people to view. And we have records going back from 1637 to present. It doesn't matter who you are. If you want to see some of our earliest records, we'll gladly show you them and take them out for you. So
I always think it's neat when you have the documents and you have the records dating back and so significantly, but it's also special when they're put together in a way like the exhibit that's coming up on Thursday, because it's put together to tell a story,
exactly.
Our story, correct?
Yeah. That's the thing. We could hide it away and seal it away, but our mission at the archives is to collect, preserve, and make available. And I think make available is the most important part of that. And part of that, making this stuff available, is making it available through exhibits, making sure we have, we can be open so for people to view this stuff, and just being accessible.
Yeah, definitely being accessible. Let's talk a little bit about how extensive this collection is. You said you have stuff dating back to 1637.
Yep.
I can imagine that's quite a bit. Talk to me just about the magnitude of the records of the archive.
It can actually get pretty overwhelming. We have 20,000 cubic feet of records. We have about 6,000 to 8,000 off-site storage, and we have records throughout the city. DPW has a lot of historic records. Actually, the Planning and Development has some historic records. So we have a lot of records. And being one of the older cities in this country, we've accumulated a lot of stuff. I'm sure the Washington's or the Seattle archives is far smaller than us because they haven't been around as long as we have. But
maybe not as much. What are some of the things that the archives do collect? Are there some things that you think might not be as historically significant, and what are some things that you do hang on to?
We always collect city-generated documents, so it's funny because a lot of, we're not finite. We're constantly receiving records, and actually a lot of our job is managing incoming records, which is another segment called records management. So we have to manage all the records that are coming in from the city, as recent as probably last year. And those can be something as mundane as invoices to something as significant as, a resolution that passed that was pretty important, like, or that nature. Sometimes we collect something called ephemera. People donate things. Usually we don't, because archives don't usually take in 3D objects, we call them, or museum objects, like something like that.
Oh, I know, we do have some good antiques.
We did a police exhibit for the 150th anniversary of the police department a few years ago, and we got approached by a woman whose ancestor was a police chief in Providence during the turn of the century. And we have his hat, we have his billy clubs, so we have all kinds of things. We have some coats and jackets that we received from the Providence Police Department. So we're getting more and more of those kind of objects in, and they're great for exhibits. People love seeing that stuff and holding that stuff.
That's pretty cool. Do you have significant records of like maps and layouts and how the city looked? Because this city has changed significantly over the course of its time with waterways,
exactly.
with the foundation. I mean, the way you read about how this city has formed has changed significantly from when it first started. Do you have that kind of document?
Oh yeah, we have they call them plat maps, which plat out different lots that people used to own. We have atlas maps. We have some of them are city generated. Some of them are they're generated by the privately. We actually have insurance maps, fire insurance maps going back to the 1920s, which a lot of researchers like because they actually documented buildings and things, so you can see how they changed through time, and even things like railroad maps and things, because Providence had a significant railroad system. The Union Station was one of the second largest train stations in the country during the turn of the century. So we have all kinds of different maps, and they're generated by different entities, and I'd say that's a very important segment of our collection, just to see, as you said, the changes in time to the urban architectural environment of the city.
Do you think that having all those documents and being able to have them on hand can help as we move forward in our future to urban planning development, and as we are impacted by whether it's storms, fires, that kind of thing?
Yes, definitely. I forgot to mention too that we have a significant blueprint collection. We don't have too many blueprints of private buildings per se, but mostly of municipal buildings and things of that nature. In fact, actually, we recently had we have the blueprints for the Industrial Trust Bank building tower,
Oh,
or
wow.
AKA the Superman building. And we had them digitized recently because they're very fragile, these blueprints. And these things were from 1924. And, you know, these architects would abuse these things. You know, they'd open them up right in the field, basically, so to speak, and go through them. So we had that digitized recently.
That's
And
neat.
so I think they're important, especially the blueprints, because once they're gone, they're gone. And
Once they're gone,
yeah.
they're gone. As we kind of wrap up here, talk to me a little bit about maybe some of your favorite items in the collection, or maybe some VIP items in the archive.
Well, I'd say the VIP is probably my favorite items, to be completely honest. But my favorite item is the 1637 compact, the town compact,
Wow.
which has the original proprietors of Providence. And it was signed in 1637, you know, a year after Roger Williams came here. And they came down from Massachusetts. And it's the first document in the Western world to outline the separation of church and state. And it's a small little document. It was written on deer skin. And we have it conserved and sealed, but people can come in, I can take it out for them, they can see it. And I think it's one of the most precious documents we have in the archives.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
pretty
it
incredible.
is, yeah.
Okay,
Definitely.
and I guess my last question is, because it is President's Day as we move forward
Mhm.
in February and celebrating several presidents' birthdays, do we have any historical documents within the city of Providence of presidents coming to visit here and spending a lot of time here?
It's funny you mention that because I've been doing a lot of research on that. It's something I've been pretty interested in. We've had a lot of presidents visit here. We had George Washington visit here, all the way up to we had JFK, of course, over at at former Exchange
Yeah.
Place. It became Kennedy Plaza after he visited in November of 1960. Lyndon B. Johnson was here. Even Richard Nixon. We have photographs of Truman here, Roosevelt.
Wow.
It seemed to be a popular stop for the presidents. And of course, Lincoln was here. He actually spoke over at the Union Station Railroad, the first incarnation of it, before it burned down in the 1880s and they built a new one. But,
Oh my goodness.
you know, there was a strong, there's a lot of Lincoln supporters in Providence during the 1860s, so he stopped here
Wow. Do we
during
have?
his 1860 election.
Is there any memorial? Do we know in Providence for him?
There's
Like, he was here like a.
there's a plaque,
There's a plaque.
but there's no actual real memorial.
There's a plaque though.
Yeah.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, Caleb, thank you so much
Yeah,
for joining me
definitely.
today. It was
Yeah.
such a pleasure
Yes,
to meet
anytime,
you.
anytime.
Hopefully we filled in some of you history buffs on some exciting things within the Providence City Archives, and it is open to the public. So if you need to scratch your history itch, you can head over and make an appointment. That way he can help you a little bit more. Also, the exhibit that is opening on Thursday is called Home, the Housing Struggle in Providence from 1950 through today. So Caleb, thank you again so much for joining me. We're going to get set up here for our next guest on GoLocal Live, so hang tight with us as we get ready for that. Awesome, great job.
Great, thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining me here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. I'd like to say hello and welcome to President of Foolproof Brewing Company, Nick Garrison. Nick, how you doing?
I'm good. Good to be back. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, of course. We love having you here in the studio. So you have been a very busy man, doing a lot of traveling, and pretty busy in the brewery as well. So
That's right.
we thank you for making the time to join us here today. So want to showcase some new beers, some new news that's going on, and talk about some achievements that the brewery has had recently. So let's start off with some new news that you guys are growing, expanding, getting bigger, lots of that kind of cool stuff. Why don't you tell us about the expansion news?
Yeah, I have been quite busy. I just got back from trips to New Jersey and Northern Virginia, where we just launched Foolproof within a couple weeks of each other. So very exciting to be expanding our distribution footprint outside of the Ocean State and New England altogether. So so far so good. We're really looking forward to launching those markets.
I mean, that's incredible and pretty powerful to be able to say we're stepping outside of New England. So why did the choice to hit those locations?
So we found some really great wholesale partners, which in this business is incredibly important because we're in that distribution model where we're selling our beer to wholesalers and then they sell it on to the liquor stores and the bars and restaurants, etc. So we just found two fantastic companies. Both markets seemed like they were kind of ripe for the opportunity for a New England beer to come down there. There's not a whole lot of New England craft beer down in that part of the country, so we see Mid-Atlantic as maybe like a new expansion point for Foolproof.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you hit up New Jersey and Virginia. What was it like for you to be down there making connections with different wholesalers and distributors? What was that like for you to make sure you're making the right choice where you're taking that risk, but it's not too risky?
Yeah, well, it's first off, it's really exciting because no one's heard of the brand, and you're kind of starting from ground zero, which has its challenges, of course. But no, it's great to take like this sort of export from Rhode Island and bring it down there and introduce it to a whole new group of people. And you never know if one of these markets takes off. Rhode Island is a pretty small market by population. You go into a state like New Jersey where there's 9 million people. And that could easily become your number one market. So it's kind of a mix of emotions. It's a little scary. It's exciting. It's all balled into one.
I think that's pretty cool and pretty exciting. We talked a lot on this show about beer as a business, about food being your business in a lot of ways. Talk to me about. I was kind of curious about this when we were going back and forth. If people are in these other states, they're drinking your product. And say they come to Rhode Island and they're like, hey, I've heard about Foolproof. I've had Foolproof at home. And they're coming here on vacation. Does that give them an opportunity? Is that then in their mind that, like, maybe I'll come to the brewery then? Maybe I'll come make this part of my destination because these millennials are all about experience, right?
Yes, yes.
And making trips about destinations. I'm a millennial, so I can say that nicely because that's what I like to do. I mean, is that maybe part of this, or could that be a nice byproduct?
Yeah, well, I think what you're touching on, Molly, is this idea of beer tourism.
Yeah.
And the idea of like people coming to Rhode Island or Massachusetts or anywhere actually and making beer part of that trip. And
Yeah.
that is absolutely a thing. It's definitely something that's happening right here in Rhode Island. It happens at Foolproof. I mean, we see people, such a eclectic mix of people that come to the brewery. We have local people, we have folks from out of town, we have regulars that are in there every week. So it's really exciting. So I think, in short, the answer is absolutely. People are seeking out these breweries as part of a tourism experience, and we love having them.
Because I think, you don't have to go to Germany, right? You don't have to go to Oktoberfest to go to Oktoberfest. You can stay right here, and it's becoming more and more popular. So I think when expanding the product to these different places, you can expand Rhode Island to different places too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's kind of cool. You feel like every time somebody buys a can of Foolproof, like they're buying a little piece of Rhode Island with them. So, just going back to places like Virginia and New Jersey, I think that point hammers home even more in those markets than some of our more local markets up here in New England.
Yeah, I know when I go to a bar, go to a restaurant, whatever, we always like to go through the beer list and guess where it's made. Mm-hmm. That's one of our favorite things to do when we're out. We're like, okay, where's this? So it would be fun to be in another place and say, oh, there's Foolproof, made in Rhode Island. We know that one. We recognize that one.
Yeah, you also have a surprising number of people, like you might have kind of expats, Rhode Island living down in those markets,
so
and they're looking for something familiar.
Yeah.
And so you can have this whole sort of unknown market just in out-of-state Rhode Islanders living in those markets that you might be reaching as well.
Definitely. So you're starting with those two. Are you kind of getting a feel? Are these almost like tester outside the markets? Or are you looking to expand then after that, see how this goes?
I mean, I think we've always got our eyes open. Yeah. We're finally starting to move out of winter a little bit. So that usually means in the beer world, we're going to have our hands full just in terms of supporting our current markets. So I would be surprised if we enter any new markets within the next few months, just as as we ramp up for summer. And we have some new beers coming out in our home state, so we'll have our hands full with that as well. But you never know. I mean, we do try to keep an open mind about every possibility, every opportunity.
Well, congratulations to you, because that's very exciting and
Thank you.
and pretty big. So you did mention we have new beers coming up. So let's talk a little bit about this.
Sure.
We have a couple here, but this is kind of the big one and the exciting one. I think it's fun that some people are saying everyone's always brewing IPAs in Rhode Island. So you're taking a step in a different direction and brewing maybe not an IPA.
Yes, there is a little bit of IPA burnout out there sometimes, despite the amount of IPA that we still brew. But we kind of took that feedback to heart, and so many people saying, sometimes I just want something really light, refreshing, low alcohol, a lower price point, and we kind of sat down as a team and we realized, well, we can check all of those boxes with one beer. So we're getting very excited to launch our new Ocean State Lager, and it's going to be actually shipping out in kegs first next week, and then toward the end of March we'll have the cans available. So what I brought today is actually not a real beer can. It's a pilot, which might be kind of interesting for people to see. This is how you make a beer can. You first get a proof, essentially, and approve it. But that's what the can's going to look like, and hopefully we'll see a whole bunch of those on shelves in Rhode Island and around New England this summer. So we're getting very excited.
Do you always have your team? Has it been the same original team doing the design this whole time? Because the design's always on point.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. My friend and our partner Liz Weinberg, who's a RISD graduate, nice local story there. She does all the work, and she and I kind of collaborate on the designs and the copy and the beer names, and also obviously taking input from my team as well. So we have a very kind of hectic, bizarre creative experience, if you will, but we're always happy with the end product. So
it looks good, like you said, on point. Ocean State Lager, basic, simple, easy. That's kind of the point, right? Easy to drink, easy to
and brewed right here in Rhode Island. So
gotta love that. So people can expect it. If you want a keg for St. Patrick's Day, you can get that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
if you want cans, it'll be at the end of the month.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's cool. So on tap when in the brewery if people want to come grab it?
So we'll be kegging it next Monday. So
Okay.
we open for tastings Thursday through Sunday. So probably next Thursday will be the first time you can come in and taste a pint of Ocean State Lager. Maybe grab a growler or howler to go, and then the cans won't be too far behind, but you have to wait a few more weeks for those.
Because for me, I think I would like just to have this can, right? Like for people who want gifts for friends and that kind of thing. I mean, this is a great gift for people. Like even if they don't drink beer, it's kind of a fun can.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly, and it's always exciting for us releasing a new beer because we don't know how it's going to do. We don't know what the feedback's going to be, and so again, it's kind of like launching a new market. There's a little bit of terror and excitement blended together, but we're really optimistic about this. I think it's a great beer at a great price point, and it really hits home in the Rhode Island market.
I like that. But I mean, do you still get nervous when you release a new beer? Because
Absolutely.
You do.
Particularly when you buy a truckload of cans, which is what we're required to do. So,
okay.
But
because it's money. Okay, I get it.
I feel like after all the time and consideration we put into the beer itself, the recipe development, the packaging, the naming, we've really analyzed things as best we can, and I feel pretty optimistic about it.
Okay, that's good. I can understand that, because I was going to say you've gotten to the point where you've built up the credibility, you've built up to the success, you have enough to get to the point where maybe you shouldn't be nervous, but I can understand,
it wouldn't be fun if it wasn't scary.
Well, okay, I can hear that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that you have going on.
Sure.
What did you bring with us today?
So I just brought some of our current seasonal beers that are out there. They're both relatively new. They're both dark beers, which is very fitting for the weather we've been having. Probably the most popular one is our new Vanilla Espresso Rain Cloud. And if there are any coffee drinkers / beer drinkers, you definitely got to check this beer out. It's fantastic. Italian espresso coffee, vanilla, and then using our Rain Cloud porter as sort of the base. And it's in this nice sleek 16-ounce can, and it's been doing very well for us. And the other beer I brought was, some of our viewers might be familiar with our Forecast project. Forecast is essentially a rotating beer series, and it's a play off of New England weather. So just like it was snowing yesterday and then it was 60 degrees in the afternoon, it's very unpredictable, it changes all the time, and that's what this beer is all about. So this particular iteration, which is Chapter 4, is a black India Pale Lager. And so one of the unifying themes of this beer is like we're always brewing kind of an unusual beer style or are using different ingredients. So if the reaction is that sounds kind of weird, we've done our job with forecast. So
Wait, if that sounds weird, we want it.
yeah,
That's what we like chocolate and oysters in a beer.
That's right.
But you have fun with it, and I like the idea that you want to be creative with your beers, and you still want to make it. You want to make it good. You want to make it fun,
Yes.
and because the whole theme behind this, kind of your mission, is experience-based beers. Talk to me about how you've encompassed that as a theme throughout this whole brewing experience.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, I opened Foolproof because I love this idea of beer as an experience. That's what it was always about to me. And so everything we do, from our packaging, to our experience in the tap room, to our events, it's all about the customer experience. And so I've always felt that if we stay true to that, we're going to be successful. So we have some pretty cool events coming up along those lines. We just had a Valentine's Day event last Wednesday, beer and chocolate and oysters, very romantic.
It is romantic.
And then actually this Wednesday we have a Paint and Pints event where you come in and you actually learn how to paint, and you have a few beers too, so you don't sweat it too much if you're not good. We still have tickets available for that, by the way. If you want to go to foolproofbrewing.com, visit our Facebook events page, you'll find ticket links there. So.
Great. Yeah, and that's what's cool is that not only do you have the opportunity to come in, grab a drink, hang out with your friends, but you also offer these experiences like the pints and painting. You have yoga all the time, which yoga's way better, I would think, with beer. But I do like yoga. Comedy events,
Yep.
Frequently. You've offered music, like different kinds of music, though, in the past. Not just you would think of like a live band, but different types of music in the past. So I think that's really neat, just continuing to kind of push that experience-based opportunity. Let's talk a little bit about not just making beer, but making good beer. How about that? So you took home some awards at the this is a long competition.
It's quite an acronym.
They
yes.
throw every different type of adult beverage into this award show. So kudos to you for winning a couple awards. The Great International Beer, Cider, Mead, and Sake Competition. So you took home number 1 in a few categories. The Light Ale for Barstool Golden Ale, awesome, and Robust Porter. So number 1 in both those categories.
Yes.
So for Rain Cloud Robust Porter. So that's pretty cool. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Big competition though. I
It
mean,
is,
a lot of events.
So first off, we wouldn't be there without my production team, our head brewer Steve Sharp. Those guys just work tirelessly, and when we take home these medals, it really means a lot to them. It means a lot to me, obviously, but I'm not the guy making the beer anymore, so I think it means a lot to them. But yeah, we were just so thrilled and humbled to take home 2 gold medals in what has become, I believe, the second largest medaling competition for beer in the United States. So this, the long acronym, it was previously the Great International Beer Festival, and then it moved down to Connecticut from the convention center here in Providence, and they incorporated, I think, sake and cider and some other beverages. But every year the competition grows, so that means it's that much harder to win a medal. And so to take home 2 and let alone gold medals was very special for us. I think we were the most award-winning Rhode Island brewery, so we're very, very excited about that. And it's a total blind competition, so you don't know, like when you're judging in it, you don't know what you're drinking. There's no bias in terms of like who's brewing the beer, so it's taking home a medal is a big deal.
I mean, that's absolutely incredible, and to get 2. So this, I mean, yeah, it's a big deal. Does that make you feel, just kind of give you that confidence to make sure you can continue to do what you're doing year after year? Does it kind of just give you that boost?
I mean, I think we're always so critical of ourselves, but winning something like this is definitely a validation that hey, we're doing something right.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely a nice tip of the cap to have take home those medals. But we're still working every day on just continually improving our beers, being as innovative as we can, listening to customer, and really understanding what they're looking for.
Definitely. Before we let you go, Nick, I want to talk to you a little bit about the changing beer climate here in Rhode Island. It's continuously growing. You've been going at this for a long time. And we've kind of talked about this the past couple times you've been on. Just what are your thoughts? We're seeing more and more breweries pop up. We're seeing more people get into the craft brewing business industry. What are your thoughts? You've stuck around for this time and you're continuing to grow and expand. What's it like for you?
I know, I'm like the old guy now. I've been around for 5 years. Well, first of all, it's great. It's fantastic to see this I always refer to it as the mini Rhode Island beer renaissance, and so it's great to see the continuation of that. And people ask me all the time, like, how many breweries are in the state? And honestly, I feel like week to week you can't give an accurate answer to that question.
It's changing.
But last time I checked, I think by the end of this year, there's in all likelihood we'll have 25 breweries operating in Rhode Island.
Wow.
So it's great. I mean, it certainly creates a very competitive market, but that's ultimately a good thing for the beer consumer because it means you have to put out the best beer possible. You got to put your best foot forward, and that really benefits everyone, particularly the consumer. So I still think there's a lot of room for growth, particularly us. And I think we're just getting started.
That's awesome. I think we'll leave it with that. Thank you so much for joining
Thanks
me
for
today.
having me on. Absolutely.
Always a pleasure. So if you're interested in any of those events or any more information on their beer release date and when you can buy it, we'll have a link, of course, to Foolproof Brewery on our website, golocalproud.com. Please hang tight. We're going to get set up for our friend Jim Fortier with Blueprint 5 here in just a moment. So thanks for watching here on Go Local Live. Hang tight. We'll get set up. Everyone, thanks for joining us here in the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. Our friend Jim Fortier of Blueprint 5 is here talking about all things men's fashion as we are getting ready for spring. Jim, how are you?
I'm terrific. It's so good to see you again.
So good to see you as well. So it is not quite spring, but that's what we're going to talk about today because we want it to be spring.
But it's so close.
It's so close.
It's going to be 65 this week.
Molly, we're going to stop.
Okay.